Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we seem to have kind of a full house tonight, and we have, if you would like to speak at any time later on, there's a form over there to speak, and then let us know if you want to talk, ask questions later on in the program. Yeah. Next item is the Commissioner Communications.
We have to do
Anything?
roll call first.
Oh, that's right, excuse me. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Andrew?
Here.
Commissioner French? Here. Sorry. Commissioner Garrison?
Here.
Commissioner Kalani?
Here.
Commissioner McNeil?
Yep.
All present. Oh, I've always forgotten.
Now we're up to, yeah.
Okay, now does anybody have any comments from the commission? No? Then we'll continue on to the regular meeting. Approval of the agenda.
I move.
Second. Call the call.
Commissioner Andrew?
Yes.
Commissioner French? Yes. Commissioner Garrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Kalani?
Yes.
Commissioner McNeil?
Yes.
And the action items,
Well, we have to, I think, we're up to public comment.
Comments?
This is where the public is.
well,
Where did you want to?
I was thinking about going towards the end where there'd be more space for everybody to talk.
You have public comment on the agenda at this point.
We've got to follow.
Yeah, so we should follow the
Can't choose.
agenda.
Okay.
Can't do your own.
Wait till it's in the end.
So, yeah, it's time for public comment.
Okay.
Now? Okay. Okay,
Debbie?
Debbie Noble, please.
Yes. You want me here? Please.
Yes.
Okay. And I saw on the agenda I have 3 minutes, is that correct? So I have many questions about the bond overages. I guess since I'm limited to 3 minutes, I will read them all. And at the end, it probably won't be, I don't know how much time there'll be to discuss them, so if you could let me know where and when I should go to get those addressed, and how much time CRW would need if I wanted to come down and look at public records.
Okay.
These are generally questions about the 2016 bond overages. The backbone projects, I'm assuming went out to bid. I'm curious as to how many bids were received. Was the contract awarded to the lowest bidder? Did any of the bids received give anyone pause to think that the $24 million estimate might be low? Were contracts awarded not to exceed, and what were the exceptions to the not to exceed? I'm assuming the contractors knew that they were not to exceed. When was the issue of the overages, which amount to, it looks like at this time, about 25% of the, an additional 25% on the bond amount? And when was that first raised? And were the I assume there were change orders issued at some point. When were those approved? Were they approved before or after the costs were incurred? What is the approval process, and was that followed? Have all those additional dollars been paid out? But what funds were they paid out of? And I'd be curious to know the exact adjusting journal entries and reversing journal entries, if any. When were the 2017-18 financial reports issued? Has a supplemental budget been prepared? Were there any procedures or protocols not followed during this process? Will the incurrence of the additional costs and the payment thereof affect our rates as taxpayers? When would you expect those rates to be affected? Has the ability of CRW to raise additional dollars through another bond process been affected, given the impact this might have on your financial positions, especially your current financial position and cash position? I'm also very interested in what caused the overages. because that 25% is substantial. Are there any other overages or potential overages coming down the pike? I know of the 7 projects, many are not completed, or do we feel we have a handle on the overages? Is there any chance that estimates were intentionally low? And my question on that relates to whether or not CRW would have been able to get bond financing for the higher amount if it were known. And how much of this bond is supporting growth versus service to existing ratepayers?
Very,
You have
quite
30
a
seconds.
large percentage of what,
30 seconds.
30, okay, so you finished. We have, there was a study going on, and we have initiated to bring in a forensic audit to kind of go back and check us out. There are some items that you have questions for that we can't answer at this time here with us. We need to talk to people who are actually involved in it. The engineering group, the general manager, and the bookkeeping accountant. So those are things that they would have to answer, that we can't. And we found out about this shortage, I think it was about 2 weeks ago.
Right after they found out,
Yeah.
Just 2 weeks ago?
yeah. Right after they found out, we were notified.
About the 1st of March.
It
Was it?
Yeah, it was close to that, yeah.
I'd have to look.
We had a work session on February 28th.
Right, okay, and we knew about it the week before that, so earlier.
But have the monies already been paid out?
For
Or just
the-
change orders? For the overages, what's the status of the overages? Are they,
I believe most of them have, but it would be, Todd would have to respond to that.
So there's a whole, and I'll have Carol come up too. So we've only, so we paid for what we've incurred.
paid for what you've incurred, and that's been about 30 million so far?
No, that's the overall project cost for the whole.
So what you paid for what's been incurred, what's that been?
What's that? I can't remember. 18,508,000.
And you're estimating the total cost is going to be?
29,240,000.
So that's $6 million overages is everything you foresee happening in the past and going forward. And who's doing those estimates? Hopefully somebody better at estimating than the person that did the original estimate, or is it the same person?
Well, yeah, I don't know, want to be respectful of the board and what you want me to do. But I can
I mean,
either follow up.
it's clear those estimates were very
So
good.
all these projects are under contract.
Yeah.
I think it's
So
okay
we
if
have-
Carol answers.
Yeah, and the estimates were prepared in 2015.
Right.
We're now in 2019, and in the midst of that, we've also completed our water system master plan, which is a state requirement. And the water system master plan identified some changes to the original thoughts on many of those projects. So rather than build something that would be inadequate, we have expanded a couple of the projects to meet the needs of the district.
And that would be normal then to just go through operating, the normal operating budget versus an additional bond? Something like that.
It would be a capital purchase, so it would not be part of the ordinary operating budget, but we have sufficient resources in our reserves to be able to accommodate those changes. And again, those changes were identified in the water system master plan that is guiding us to make some changes in what we're actually building.
And that, you said, occurred between 2015
And currently, the water system master plan has not yet been approved by the board, but we've gotten comments back from submitting it to the state, so that should be approved shortly.
So since that's current, then all of this is in your budget as, it's all reflected in the budget, current budget?
We budgeted for what we expected. We are on a biennial budget, so we did the budget over 2 years ago, and we budgeted for what we anticipated those costs to be. And the water system master plan has just now been completed in the midst of the budget cycle that we're in, which is why we'll be coming to the board for a supplemental budget at the March 25th special meeting.
When did you start preparing the water system?
The water system master plan, it was in 2017.
But you don't have any numbers for it?
If she's finished.
No, I think it's okay if you finish the discussion.
So
Go ahead.
normally this is a public comment time. We've got a lot of questions, be happy to follow up
Okay.
on these.
Sure.
I want to be respectful of the board time and stuff.
Likewise. So that was my first statement, was when and where and how do I do that?
Yeah, we can, I'll give you my information, we'll coordinate
Okay,
on schedule it works well.
we'll just see you after the meeting.
Either way, or Karen will set something up with us and stuff.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment though, if I might, just for clarification. The term forensic audit was used, it's not a forensic audit. We do an audit, it's an audit, it's a financial audit.
Well, and that's an item on your agenda in the future, so.
Right, but
I
she
think you
brought
should
it up,
wait.
so,
No, thank you.
I'll explain that when we get to that.
oh, okay.
Agenda item.
Okay, then, Tonya Reed.
Hi.
Thank you.
It has come to our attention that a business is in the process of developing a full-service car wash in our neighborhood at the end of Cornwall. It will be as close as 25 feet to homes. I have contacted OSU Extension Services, the EPA, CFAR, DEQ, the Oregon DEQ Justice Coordinator directed us to share our concerns with Clackamas River water. None of these entities have any record of any environmental impact study ever having been performed on a car wash, and this is alarming. What goes up must come down. Car exhaust, chemicals, waxes, soaps, acids are all carried by the wind and dripped from the undercarriages of cars, settling on nearby streets and properties. Rainwater carries it to our storm drains. We visited the Eco Car Wash situated similarly to how ours will be. The most notable difference is that the driveway to the Eco Car Wash is located on 82nd and the surrounding homes are structured within city blocks. The driveways to the proposed car wash in our neighborhood will be placed on residential streets, not 82nd. Our neighborhood has only 2 streets. Another notable difference is that the Eco Car Wash is smaller in scale than the one proposed for our neighborhood. We interviewed 3 households around the Eco Car Wash. The information they shared was alarming. They have soot covering their yards since the development of the car wash just 4 years ago. The vegetation in their yards are suffering. The offensive odor of soot, waxes, and rust can be detected not only from their yards but inside their homes. They have irritated respiratory tracts in their yards. They do not feel safe growing their own food in their yards. The DEQ and the EPA shared links to the CDC, the American Cancer Society, and the American Lung Association. The exhaust is the anticipated 100 cars per hour with idling times averaging 20 minutes will have deleterious consequences. We're already exposed to the exhaust from 82nd, Johnson Creek, and 205. The chemicals used in the car wash should be studied. The tire shine products they use have led to premature erosion of the streets in Portland. The chemicals have caused slip and fall situations. These chemicals cause irritation to eyes, respiratory tracts, and other illnesses. These chemicals have the ability to travel through the air, drip into cars, drip from the cars, and settle on nearby streets and properties, harming the yards and ecosystems. Our neighborhood was built in the 40s, and many of our residents lived there their entire lives. Our children and grandchildren play on the streets. Many of us exercise outside and walk to local stores. Many of us grow our own food. Most of us visit the local creeks and rivers. After clearing up the soot-covered yards, the smell of soap, acids, exhaust fumes being carried to homes throughout the neighborhood, chemicals and oils dripping from their cars as they drive away. Don't we owe it to our environment to determine if the car wash should be in such close proximity to our neighborhood? And shouldn't we have a better understanding of what we are contaminating our streets, homes, and waterways with?
Excuse me, I thought that the state or the county were involved in that, you know.
They keep sending me
Oh.
is where I've landed.
Oh, yes, that's
I
good.
would, yeah, zoning would come to mind too.
Yeah. Huh.
Zoning
No.
out of their jurisdiction.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it is.
So,
Todd, have you heard anything about this?
I'm not familiar with this project. I'm wondering, especially with the discharge stuff, actually, and I hate to tell you another agency, but Water Environment Services does the stormwater and wastewater aspect of it. And so we can get you their information and follow up with you. Is your contact information on that? Okay. So that's all right. We'll get you their contacts and I'll help get you right with that. We can try to track that down.
sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, should I have my phone number? Would that be okay?
Yes, please do. If you put it down here, that'd be awesome. Just give me this one. Thank you.
Is that all?
No,
That was just the two.
just the two, there's nobody else?
No.
No, there's no one else.
Is there anybody else in the public that wants to speak before we move on? Okay.
Then I guess we will move on. Consider approval of 219 board goals for the general manager.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having
Yeah,
us.
we're sorry.
Yeah.
that-
Yeah.
So included in your packet was the goals that we had a chance to introduce and go through at the January 22nd work session. And then we also had an opportunity, provide an opportunity for the board to provide additional inputs during the February board meeting as well. And so I haven't received any additional changes from the board, and so as we do traditionally, there's before you for approval, for your consideration.
Okay, I move to approve the 2019 board goals for the general manager.
Second,
Okay, so,
moved and second.
yeah, so are we going to discuss it?
Any discussion?
Nobody has said anything. I did.
No. Any
Did you?
discussion?
Marcia, I did second.
Yeah.
Oh, you- I
We
thought
were
you
asking
raised
if
your
there's
hand.
any discussion, but I guess,
Oh, no, I did not.
Commissioner Ranger,
yes.
Commissioner French,
Yes.
Commissioner Garrison,
Yes.
Commissioner Kalani,
Yes.
Commissioner McNeil.
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Backbone project program examination. 1.5.
Yes, it's a purple one. It's hard to keep track of, it's paperless.
Oh, here we go. This one is.
Yeah. So somebody's.
Okay, who's gonna present the motion?
I just read this? Okay. I move to engage Moss Adams to perform a program examination of the backbone project and authorize the general manager to execute a contract for those services with a not-to-exceed expense of $20,000.
Second.
One comment I have is that when we talked about this initially, it was a forensic audit, but it is not.
So I had a conversation with Julie DeSimone, the district's auditor, about what the proper approach would be in these circumstances. And she explained that when you're looking at a particular program and needing to look at the ins and outs from that program, reporting, making recommendations, that what Moss Adams would do in those circumstances would be an examination, a program examination. I asked her why it would not be a forensic audit, and her explanation was that a forensic audit is an examination and evaluation of a firm's or individual's financial information for use as evidence in court. A forensic audit can be conducted in order to prosecute a party for fraud, embezzlement, or other financial crimes. It's obviously not the case here. So what she's provided is a scope of work, which, I know there's several pages in what she provided, but really the important part is on page 3 of her proposal, which outlines the scope, which describes what Moss Adams would propose to do, including a review of all the, a review of the bond, a review of the spending, and testing of the expenditure. That's the, what we might informally refer to as auditing, and then providing recommendations to the board, including recommendations for improvement of reporting. So she estimates that in order to provide those services, it would cost $18,000, and she proposes a time frame that would aim to complete the project by the end of April.
So I just have a question. Yeah, my question is, I am not necessarily opposed to an audit. I want you to know that. You know, just to, so that we're clear about, you know, make everything. But my only concern is having this extra audit going to affect our getting the second bond? And that would be my biggest concern. So, can somebody?
I don't believe that it will have an impact on that.
I don't either.
Would it have an impact on anything with our budget at all, other than spending the $20,000?
We have, staff hasn't identified any.
So there wouldn't be any negative repercussions that you can see if we did do the audit? Okay,
You
thank
know,
you.
the effect beyond the $18,000 would be the staff time that would be required.
Okay,
You know, so you have an indirect cost in that sense, but that's the only other concerns that would be present.
okay.
Well, the reason I suggested that was it had been suggested to me by some past officials with CRW, and I promoted because they knew much more about that sort of thing than I do. And there were 2 or 3 recommendations. But if this is going to take care of to find out what happened and why, and what sorts of things we can do to prevent it from happening in the future, that's fine. That's basically what I'm looking for. Well, I think all of us are.
And I think Wilson has a comment.
Yeah. We have just spent $35,000 on auditing, and I think if we're gonna spend another $18,000 or $20,000, we had better get something of value. And if it does direct us as to how better to account for money spent, and how to present that regularly so that we see these things coming, then I could support this. The spending I have seen around here and the value we've received for money spent has been, the spending's been transparent, the value we've received for money has been very good. There's a lot of new capital improvement projects that have been undertaken and mostly completed as far as phase 1. And I haven't seen anything other than good things in all of that. To be this far off on our estimates is a concern. If this will help us to do better estimates, then that's fine. But could we spend $18,000 or $20,000 someplace else and find out how to get better estimates, would be my question.
Based on the conversations I've had with others, this is the way to go.
All right, thank you.
Great.
I'm good. I'll call the question.
I'm not the.
Oh. Withdraw.
You didn't raise your hand. There you go.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, this isn't a laughing matter, and I do want to tell everybody, I mean, we all were like, when this happened, or more so, and none of us are happy about it. And I said this the last time, and I have to give some kudos to the administration, because the general manager, the CFO, the chief engineer automatically, there it was in their face, and they went right to work figuring out what caused it, how we could take care of it, you know, there's no increase to ratepayers, I mean, the whole 9 yards. And we were aware of it almost as soon as they were, and we were asked to come in for, I'll call informative sessions. Commissioner Kalani and I went in together, and then Commissioner Anger and Commissioner Garrison went in together, because you can only have 2 at a time, because then that's a quorum, so you can't do that. And we got, we're sorry, this is what happened, this is why it happened. Should it? No, but it did, and this is how we can pay for it. It's not pleasant to say we have to pay this money, okay? None of us are happy about that. Thank God that, was it 6 years ago, they did a 8-year rate plan.
That's right.
And that's set for 8 years, we're in the 6th year of that. And that it was partly enabled us to be able to take care of this. We're not happy about it, I want everybody to know that, but we want to fix it no matter what it takes. It takes more due diligence on our part as commissioners, and, you know, everybody. 'Cause we're, you know. So, that said, I'm not in favor of doing another audit if it won't hurt, I mean, if it doesn't hurt our bond rating, that's awesome, that was another concern I had. But I think, in all truthfulness, the public would probably feel better if we did have an audit. And
Transparency.
Transparency, yes, and have them say, look, okay, you know, you might have done this better. I just got through a training session for budget law, and one of the things that the state of Oregon is recommending these days is a 15 to 20% contingency on all bids. Because of the way costs, I mean, they jumped between 2015 and the time we put projects in place, say in 2018, I mean, that's a lot of the problem right there. So that's something for our engineers and our staff to think about when we start going into the next phase 2, and, you know, that contingency needs to be up there, okay? So, yeah, I think personally, in all good conscience, it's something we need to do.
You?
Yeah.
I only have one thing to say. This is $6 million out of the checkbook, not $6 million out of bond. It'll be spread over a whole bunch of years. This will have an impact on your rate, absolutely, no doubt about it. If we have another problem, we'll have $6 million less to throw at the problem. The direction of this board has always been quit living out of the checkbook, keep the checkbook for the rainy day stuff when we have a problem. We have a CIP thing that we'd like to take care of, fund that correctly. This is taking $6 million out of that. I don't know what to tell the ratepayers. I'm just embarrassed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's all I can say.
I have one more thing to say. So the bond was done in 2015. I just want to put it out there. There were a couple people who worked on the bond and put it together and didn't put enough of a contingency in that have now retired. So, the manager at the time the bond was put together was Lee Moore. Lee Moore no longer works here. And there was also a head engineer who was also retired. So, we'll just make sure this doesn't happen again, and the present management was graceful enough not to bring that up. I just bringing that up on my own, but I just want to put that out there that it did happen a while ago, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. But I personally don't have any problem with doing the audit simply because I think it would be a good idea for transparency.
Anyone have? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it was very good to hear from our current chief engineer that we really need to substantially increase the contingencies that we put into these plans up front and estimates for cost, more than double them. And I have heard that if we had used appropriate industry contingencies, that we would be right on the mark and not be behind like this.
Any others?
Call for question.
Mr. Ranger?
Yes,
Commissioner French?
Yes.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Kalani?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Mr. Ranger?
yes,
Commissioner French?
Yes.
Commissioner Garrison?
Yes.
Commissioner Kalani?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Manager's report.
Ready? All right. Agenda item 2, complaint, or contains the written portion of the report. So you've had that information. Did want to augment the written report with a few additional items I would make you aware of. One was with respect to the Clackamas Regional Water Supply Commission. The meeting was held Monday, and so obviously we didn't have information to put it into this report. During that meeting, the annual audit was accepted by the board. We also spent most of the time, the board spent most of the time discussing how to approach future water supply agreement. One of the things that the Clackamas Regional Water Supply Commission envisions is selling additional water amongst the partners. So this would be water from Clackamas River waters being sold to Sunrise on a wholesale piece. Part of the discussion revolved around the fact that the partners of the North Clackamas County Water Commission, another water provider, which includes Sunrise Water Authority, Oak Lodge Water Services, and the City of Gladstone. Those three partners are kind of coordinating their future supply planning through that organization. And so the question became, would it make sense to have a water supply agreement between, or within the CRWSC, or would it be better to have water supply agreements between CRW and the North Clackamas County Water Commission? That was part of the discussion. If the thought is that agreement between the North Clackamas County Water Commission and CRW made more sense, then there's probably less of a need for the Clackamas Regional Water Supply Commission. And so one of the things that the CRWSC board suggested is that both CRW and Sunrise go back to their respective boards and have kind of that discussion, and then the two general managers should begin to outline kind of what steps would be involved to try to help better define what that would look like if there was an interest in pursuing a CRW and North Clackamas County Water Commission agreement for selling water. And then how would that be accomplished? And so the desire at the end, or the direction at the end, was to encourage the two boards to have that discussion, and then to come back and kind of regroup and revisit the discussion at the next CRWSC meeting, which would be in June. So that's the activities associated with that. Just real quick update, we did get our FCC approval for the microwave site linking between our 3 sites, and so we're in the process of purchasing the equipment. And then you have in your looking ahead item the reference to the board meeting or the work session on March 25th. I want to note that we're actually planning on holding a special meeting on March 25th, and for the purposes of considering a supplemental budget. We'll also have your regular work session, which will do a Budget 101 training, and then the State of the District report is one of the reports that I'm required to provide to the board. And then you also have an opportunity for the executive session to review my performance. The budget committee members have been invited, since we are talking about supplemental budget, and we'll be having the Budget 101 presentation as well. In your folder, you had a variety of things. You have the monthly report. The thing I'll point out is we have started to try to expand on what reporting we do provide on the backbone project, and we'll expand that to future CIP projects. And so any feedback on those reports would be helpful to make sure we're giving you the information that you need. The second thing is you do have correspondence from State Representative Christine Drazen. We've received our address, so that's in your folder. And then I also want to make sure you're aware of the email from Marty Walt, who wanted to be here tonight, couldn't, and so I want to make sure that you actually have that, since that was an email that was sent out this afternoon. And then we do have a copy of the supplemental budget notice that will be advertised for the March 25th meeting. The supplemental budget request will be to adjust, to appropriate the remaining revenue bond proceeds, including the interest that's been accrued in that account, to allow those remaining funds to be used on the Phase 1 backbone project. So there's a $3 million unappropriated amount in the revenue bond proceeds. And so this amount will be enough to pay for the Phase 1 backbone expenses estimated for this year. So this will get us through this current budget. There will not be a need to appropriate additional funds from the Capital Reserve Fund as originally suggested to the board. As part of the original 2017-19 budget process, funds from the Capital Reserve Fund were already allocated to the CIP bonds construction fund in anticipation of the contributions we were getting from Sunrise Water Authority for their portion of the 152nd reservoir. And so the result was the entire revenue bond proceeds originally were not fully appropriated. So the supplemental budget will take care of that. There'll be a hearing on the 25th at 6 p.m. And the supplemental, so the supplemental budget request, just to be clear, will be to appropriate that remaining revenue bond proceeds, which also includes that interest. So any questions on that? So that will be, you'll get a packet, and Carol will go through a lot more detailed information associated with that at that time.
This bond appropriation, will that get us over the 85% spending?
That was actually you're way ahead of me here. So that was the other thing I was gonna mention. So what we're talking about with supplemental budget is the budgeting aspect. Right. Where we're at with the actual spend, we have, as of the end of February, met the 85%, or 85.1% of our Series 2016 revenue bond proceeds. So we will not, so we've met that 3-year.
So we don't have this additional accounting.
So we don't have to do the additional arbitrage reporting throughout the life of the bonds. So obviously, we met that target or that goal. So.
Thank you.
Some other things to update you on that are not included is, if you want to point out, we have our new Redland Reservoir number 3 is online, and so this allows us to take down reservoir number 2 offline to allow for that retrofitting to be conducted as part of that contract and that project. So progress there. It's nice to be able to use that new reservoir. We've also been working on the water treatment plant facilities master plan, and so Corolla Engineers was selected through a qualifications-based selection process. And so the way that process works is that first you select the contractor, and then you negotiate the scope and price. That will be a contract that will come back before the board for your approval. So once we get further along with that, we'll be bringing that to you, hopefully sometime in April or May for your consideration. Next thing, I just want to update you on another capital improvement project. This is the Bradley Road Waterline Project, which, as a reminder, this was a project that we were working on with the developer on to upsize a water line to a 12-inch water line to address distribution needs in our Holcomb pressure zone, where we were relying on an old 6-inch steel and cast iron line that was significantly undersized. Because of the development that was in that area, we worked with the developer to make that line bigger to meet our additional needs. The board approved an agreement where we would split roughly the cost of that project, where CRW would pay about 55% roughly, and the developer about 45%. of the costs associated with that project. Our contributions for that project really came in three parts. First, we applied the fees for the plan review and inspection of Bradley Road and the associated Abernathy development towards our contribution to that project. Second, we also provided them a credit of their system development charges for the improvement portion of the system development charges for the 97 homes that are going into that area. And then finally, the remaining balance would be made up with a cash payment by the district. The overall project was $1,113,314, of which our share was $619,923. And so after the SDC credits, after the fees that we would charge and normally collect from them, the remaining balance for CRW is to pay $266,180. We included in our CIP budget $199,000 to pay for this. So this is a project that is more than what was budgeted at that time. However, there are funds within the CIP to pay for this project. The developer has provided detailed information on the costs of the project. And I'm bringing it up to the board because we're prepared to issue payments for that in accordance with the agreements that we agreed to. Is actually an asset that we've already taken possession of and is valued at $1,113,314. So.
We spent a lot of time talking about the dollars for this. 3 meetings, and then over again. So it's actually more than what we were told it was going to be.
Yeah, part of that we wanted to bring, we just got the final cost from the developer last week, or this week, actually, so.
Okay.
There's a couple more county projects that I want you to be aware of, where there's a CRW interface. First off, county is, although it doesn't impact our infrastructure, county is preparing to do the work on the approaches to Carver Bridge. This will result in a 24-hour closure of the bridge for up to 5 days, to be aware of. We're not sure when this will happen. I think actually the pre-construction meetings next week, but I believe they have a substantial completion date of May 20th. So.
This is a county project?
Yeah. This is the county work that they've been waiting to do. The county is also assessing what to do with a slide that is closed southeast Oldcrest Road. Unfortunately, we do have a water line in that area that actually as part of that slide was exposed. And so we proactively worked with the county to cut and cap our pipe to allow for work to occur in that slide area once they figure out what to do with that without interrupting service to our customers. And so
What part of Oldcrest Road is that?
It's between Thiessen and, remember Bill?
Oh, it's really close.
I can get you
So
the information from the county closure.
Oh, okay.
No, is there damage to our line in there?
No,
Yeah.
our line was not damaged,
Uh-huh.
so it didn't leak or anything like that. However, obviously it's exposed, and so we
Right.
want to maintain it active. So as an intermediary step.
So there was an actual slide.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So it's southeast Oldcrest Road between southeast Brecky Court and southeast Thiessen Road.
Okay.
Let's see, last thing I have is we do have our interagency coordination meeting set with Clackamas Fire District #1. That's set for Monday, May 6th at 9 a.m. And so that impacts Commissioners McNeil and Garrison.
Do you have an agenda for that yet?
Just, no.
We don't. I'd just like the whole board to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, as soon as we just get the date set, and so we'll work on something before that. That meeting will be held at the Mount Scott Fire Station on Causey Avenue. So we'll get you, it's on the calendar, but we'll get you information as we go forward. And that concludes my update.
Thank you.
Either the hand.
Oh, here?
There's a hand there.
Oh,
I didn't sign up because that's what was in my packet, didn't let me know I needed to talk, so when you get to public comment, I'd like to add my name to the list.
to the,
Yeah, there's
For
a,
next public comment. So-
yeah, there's another, public
right there.
comments on the agenda now, so.
so you can, we're there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect timing, Gary.
Gary Kern, ratepayer and budget committee chairman. Over the years I've worked with CRW, I've seen many master plans, which I heard mentioned tonight a little bit. That has serious comment about the shortfall on the estimates or not. But I can tell you that as I've seen those for the last 20 years plus, they are not accurate. One of them that I looked at shows that we should be pumping 15 million gallons a day out of our plant for our own use. And it's South Sunrise should be 31 million a day. And that master plan is only 10 years old. So, as we're doing the meeting on the 25th, it would be helpful for the budget committee, particularly myself, to know if any or all of what we're talking about here for the extra funds has to do with master planning. Because master plans are not sacrosanct. They aren't mandatory, they're projections. And in the time that I worked with CRW, those projections have always been much larger and further out than what reality has been. Part of that has to do with the regional government that handles the expansion of land availability, and a lot of our phase 1 and phase 2 items are in areas that are outside their growth boundary, and they have indicated that there's no need to come this direction at this point. They can change that in 5 years, but so if, when we get to the meeting on the 25th, that can be addressed as part of that meeting for the budget committee people as well as the board. That would be very helpful for us.
So I don't know how much you were involved in the meetings that we had with the consultant.
I wasn't involved in any of them.
My biggest concern, so people understand, is they have added this fire flow thing. There's nothing in our policies that requires us to accommodate fire flow. If we try to accommodate fire flow, we're bankrupt. We can't do it. And so I'm wondering why we just pick and choose things out of the plan to use and not to use. And just like you said, the numbers are all over the board. It's kind of like the 6 years I've been on here, the CIP list, I've drug out every friggin' one of them that we've ever gotten, and they're all different. Like, you know, you just kind of throw the stuff up and it comes down, and oh, that's gonna be our list, and we don't put those money in there, we don't do it. And for one reason or another, and I don't understand how that works, but in the 2 governments that I worked for, the planning list was the planning list, and you did it, so.
Well, I just wanted to bring that up because that'll be an important part. I can see making stub ends and those kinds of things, okay? But I'm not totally familiar with the current master plan, and so if that's gonna be part of what the projection is, we ought to have copies of it so that as budget committee members, we can review it, so we can ask appropriate questions, and those kind of things. But I just wanted the board to understand that from the master plans I've seen, the projections are far above, generally speaking, what actual reality has been. None of us can predict the future, but I just wanted to ask if you would do that for us as budget committee members so that we can have that discussion when we have the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Didn't see.
Just a couple of quick questions.
Naomi, you mentioned that previous management is the one that,
Well, I wasn't really, okay, I'll have to backtrack a little on that. What I meant was, I was kind of talking about, Commissioner French was talking about the amount of contingency that you put in a bond. And obviously, our contingency was not as large as it should have been. So that has nothing to do with tracking it and everything, which was all part of, which this particular management would have been responsible for. I guess I didn't really make it clear, but I think what I was talking about was simply that when the bond was put together, it didn't have a big enough contingency plan, and I was just bringing it up for that. It was the previous administration that put together the bond.
okay.
Now, what happened after that, once we had a new administration, yes, it would be on them. So I didn't want to make it seem like I was.
Okay,
So I hope that I made that clear. And sorry I didn't make it clear in the first place.
that's all right. I was at the work session at the end of February. It sounds like it came to light because the new head engineer tallied the costs of all the approved contracts and compared it. And I'm just wondering why, has the board investigated why that wasn't done prior to February?
You mean the projects themselves?
Right, why nobody, say every time a contract was approved, looked at the total versus the bond? I mean, that seems like it would be a fairly easy and routine check, and I'm just wondering if the board has investigated that aspect of it at all.
We
So
did
that-
check the initial bidding on them, but the problem happened that later on, there was some excess that came in, beyond, above what we had thought. The plans themselves, sometimes, there were a couple that had to go a little bit deeper than what we thought they would, or what the engineering staff thought they would.
Yeah, no, I understand that change orders were issued and items like that, but I guess, to me, it would seem like every time there's a change order or a new approved contract, you should compare the total cost.
Right.
And it seems like February was late for that. So that, I'm hoping that the board will investigate why that step was never, apparently was not taken
Yeah.
throughout the process.
Yeah, you're correct, and I think that the plans we have now will show what really happened.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Is that it? No questions? No statements? No requests? We're adjourned.
No, we're not.
Oh, we did that, didn't we?
Commissioner reports?
Yeah, I thought we did that.
Here, what I got, okay.
Unless anybody else has anything to say.
Unless you want
I'm
us to
starting
change
public
it.
comment.
All right, do you want something to add?
No, I'm done.
Adjourn.